Hey everybody! On this one, we discuss the minimum gear requirements needed when you're heading out to go hunting, fishing, or hiking. We talk about why we think these things are important and provide some personal experience on these bare necessities.
Yep, that's right. It's true that outdoor sports are open to everyone. So, here we break down some of the bare essentials to enter into the outdoor world that we love so much. So, if you haven't done so yet, please make sure to follow us on Instagram and subscribe to the podcast so that you can stay up to date with all of our outdoor endeavors.
All right, thanks for giving us a listen, and without further delay, let's get into the episode. Welcome to the East Coast Hunt, Fish, Hike podcast. I'm Pat Carroll, hunter, fisherman, and general outdoor enthusiast. Join me and my brother Mike as we share tactics, recount stories, and plan our upcoming outdoor adventures. Welcome to the East Coast Hunt, Fish, Hike podcast, your home for stories and tactics in the woods and on the water. I'm Pat Carroll, and I'm joined, as always, by my brother and co-host, Mike. How's it going, Mike?
It's going well. It's going well. Things are chaotic down here in Georgia, but things are definitely going well. So, happy to be on.
Very good. Well, in this episode, we discuss the tools and gear needed when you're hunting, fishing, hiking, or just venturing into the woods for an adventure. We talk about kind of the minimum barrier for entry here as far as gear is concerned and kind of why we think that stuff is important. But before we get into it, always a good idea for us to push the social medias. So if you aren't already, please follow us on Instagram. We do have an Instagram handle that is at EC underscore hunt fish hike underscore pod. So definitely make sure you're following us there. And also rate and review. Tell us how we're doing, because that's the best way to move us up the charts, extend our reach to more listeners. Also, it lets us know what you guys want to hear about. The more you tell us, the more we can get into some of those things on the podcast, and that's going to allow us to cater to your interests and allow you guys to hear what you want to hear about. So ultimately, it's going to help. It's going to help you guys out. It's going to help me out. It's going to make everything better. So it's going to be good all the way around. All right. So, other than that, I think it's time for us to get into our recent outdoor endeavors section. I'll go first. So, here right now at the time of recording, it is fall. It is hunting season. I have had the opportunity to get outside. I've gone out about three and a half times. Three and a half. How do you have a half time, right? Three full days and one half day of hunting. And in that time, I've seen about 5 deer, which is pretty good for me ultimately, but still haven't had any success. So now it is December time frame. It's late season, so I probably have like one or two more hunts left. So looking optimistic as we get to potentially into the later portion of the season, and I do have a plan. So I think what's been happening, right? I've been seeing these deer. But they've been a little bit out of my range, probably in that like 50-yard range area, and which is good. It's good to be able to see them, but not quite striking distance. I think
Yeah.
what happened is because it's been like really droughty this year, that area that I thought was like kind of marshy, like too marshy for them to get around in, I think it's so dry down there that they can actually use that as like a walking path. So I think I need to get myself a little bit closer to that marsh edge because that's where I've seen them, and I think that's where I'm going to be able to really be able to get a good opportunity there. So I'm looking forward to potentially having a chance this weekend to get in the woods and try out that theory of getting close to the marsh edge where I've seen the deer before. Now I haven't set up there yet. I'm hoping I can find an appropriate tree with enough back cover that I'm not going to be sticking out like a lollipop on a tree. But I'm optimistic. I'm hoping I can find that perfect tree, get into the woods, and maybe seal the deal. So excited about that opportunity here. But Mike, what have you been up to as far as outdoor adventures?
Yeah, so for me, I've been Well, it hasn't been as much kind of like outdoor sports by way of like hunting and fishing as I might have hoped, but I have been able to get outside quite a bit, and not just outside down here in the south, but up north a little bit. And so, a couple of weekends ago, I had a chance to be able to go up with a couple of buddies of mine. It's the fall time, kind of moving into early December here, and we just had Thanksgiving as of a couple of weeks ago, and so I had a chance to be able to go up to New York. It was a kind of a combination of a couple of things. Predominantly, though, the Atlanta Falcons were playing the New York Jets, and
Okay.
so a couple of buddies of mine, we decided that we were going to go up to the game, and it I was able to kind of allow it to overlap with a conversation that I was going to be having with my literary agent. For those of you that are following from the Required Reading podcast or have followed me along on social media, you might know that I do a lot of writing. That I have a literary agent up in New York, and so I was kind of trying to curtail this trip up to New York with a sit down with my agent to talk about some of the books that I'm working on getting published. And so in the midst of this, there was a football game between the Atlanta Falcons and the New York Jets that I
Nice.
got to see. And I haven't gone to a Falcons game in a little while, but it was a ton of fun. Couple of buddies of mine, we went up. We saw the Empire State Building, and we did kind of some of the New York touristy stuff, and
Nice.
went to like a comedy show, and it was super awesome. And then on the Sunday, we woke up and it was super cold and super dreary. And so while it might not be as much of an outdoor adventure by way of like getting into a tree stand or
Hmm.
getting out on the lake in order to do a little bit of fishing, I did have an opportunity to put some of my normal kind of like casual gear to the test in terms of how it worked in terms of the outdoor elements. And
Hmm.
let me tell you, Pat, they failed really miserably, really, really, really miserably. So before I went down on this trip, I had gone out and I got a couple of pairs of like sneakers, a couple of pairs of shoes
Hmm.
that I was thinking about bringing on the trip. But I flew an airline that it was going to cost a little bit more if I was going to be trying to ship bags, and so I only went up there with the one pair of shoes, which was mistake number one, because the shoes that I was wearing were such that they had holes technically in the bottom of them that wouldn't have been an issue altogether on its own, but for the fact that these holes had gotten far enough that they actually ended up seeping into kind of like the sole of my shoe.
Oh no.
And so it was probably about upper 30s, maybe lower 40s, but it
Hmm.
was dreary and rainy and there were puddles everywhere. And the stadium, the MetLife Stadium, is a
Hmm.
totally outdoor stadium.
Hmm.
And so as a result, there I was out there in the bleachers, and it didn't even take getting to the bleachers. It was during the tailgate beforehand,
Hmm.
walking around and getting a little bit of food, and walking around to some of the Falcons tailgates and something like that, where my shoes were soaked,
Oh no.
and it was cold, and so my feet were getting super wet and super cold. And in fact, one of my buddies, uh, Stephen Vickery, actually, and he might be listening to this. He's the one that was there the night that I ended up. My other night that I was very cold and had cold clothing was when I went into the Chattahoochee. He was also there, and so he was flying out right after the game, and so he had all of his stuff with him. So we actually had an extra pair of socks that he let me.
Oh
So there
wow.
I am in the bathroom of MetLife, and I'm putting on a pair of socks and wringing out the socks that I was wearing at the time. So it was a complete disaster. By the end of the game, I had soaked through three pairs of socks, and
Wow.
I was in the bathroom with like um, full mats of paper towels that I was putting into my shoes, and so I was absolutely freezing, and my toes were freezing, and but thanks to Vic, I had some socks that I was able to make my way through slowly but surely. But yeah, my clothing failed in terms of being able to survive the elements. I was very cold and very wet, and so that was less than ideal, certainly. But I was able to meet with my agent. We had a great conversation. Went to a little coffee shop, and that was really on kind of like the last day before I was heading out. And then I went to an Irish pub and I got a little bit of food before I was flying down, and as it turns out, I actually ended up getting food poisoning.
Oh no.
I can confirm on my flight down. So it was a miserable flight back.
Oh,
The first couple of days back after the trip, I ended up actually having to call out of work because I
oh
was
man.
really in the thick of it with some confirmed food poisoning. So that was pretty rough. I had had a bowl of clam chowder and a BLT, and I'm not sure which one it was that was the
I'm
culprit,
gonna tell you which
but
one I
one of
think it
them
was.
was. Yeah, you think it was, well, normally I would say it's probably the clam chowder, and Anthony Bourdain has this whole bit where he talks about trying not to get seafood on Mondays after the weekend. I
Hmm.
think it was probably the clam chowder, but more often than not, food poisoning actually comes a lot of times from unwashed lettuce.
Hey, there you go.
And so there's a possibility that it could have come from either one. I'm not going to point fingers at either one, but I will tell you that I won't be eating either one anytime soon. Those Both of those have been stricken from my diet for the time being. So it was an amazing trip up to New York, and then the end of it until it wasn't,
Yeah.
because the end of it was pretty brutal. But this most recent weekend, we had a chance to be able to go up to a Christmas tree farm that's by us, and it's one of the days that I really look forward to every single year. We go up with the family. There's like a little farm that's up there, and we get our tree. One of these years I'll go out there with the handsaw and actually like saw the thing down, but for the time being, where we just get the ones that have been chopped down already by this Christmas tree farm. But it's this quaint little farm. We go there every year and get some kind of like snacks and get the ornament that comes along with the tree. Do a little roasting of marshmallows. They've got a farm, and my 1 year old loves cows, and so they had some cows that were there, and he was mooing along with them. It's become a day that I really look forward to every year, and this year was no exception. It was really awesome to be able to get up to the Christmas tree farm, and then we came back. My wife made fudge. We watched a Christmas movie, decorated the tree. So kind of all those holiday things. Now that we're into the beginning of December, so not strictly like outdoor adventures, but outdoor endeavors, I guess you could certainly say. So
Yeah.
that's a little bit about what's been going on down here in
N-
Georgia.
No, definitely. I mean, those are definitely adventures in their own way, right? No, I know we actually got our Christmas tree as well, and that one was also get it from a farm. We've gotten them. We've gone to places where you can like actually cut them down as well previously, and it hasn't. They've been fine. Usually the tree quality isn't quite as good, but the place that we get them now is just a farm. Um, and they have a farm stand. They have like cider donuts and stuff like that too, which I also enjoy.
Yeah,
So it's like it's the whole experience, right? Instead of I don't get to cut it
yeah,
down, but the trees are a little nicer, and I get cider donuts too. So I mean, ultimately,
yeah,
it's kind of a win-win in that
yeah,
regard. It's no, it ends up working
yeah.
out pretty
Same
good.
thing here. Yeah, they've got the little like farmers market where they have like barbecue rubs, which I still have mine from last year that I haven't gone all the way through, so I
Nice.
was able to kind of avoid another purchase there. But they've got the apple cider donuts, which I should have just gotten them. I was like, like we've gotten them before. Like we can just get them in the grocery store. Of course, the grocery store doesn't like really sell them now that we're getting into December and a little bit
Hmm.
further away from Thanksgiving. So that was a purchase that we didn't make that in retrospect I wish that we had. But it sounds like a really similar situation. Though I will say that the Christmas tree farm this year, everybody was talking about how great the trees were this
Oh,
year.
nice.
Last year, it's not that they were particularly bad last year, but I think that they were a little bit more picked through.
Hmm.
This year, they had some bangers. They had some really good trees, and so the very first one that we saw was really nice. But I'm kind of like a process of elimination shopper, so
Hmm.
I insisted that we keep walking and take a look at some of the other ones. Of course, by the time we got back to it, there was a woman that bought it like right out from under our noses. So I was like, all right, we got to pull the trigger on one of these now. And so we were walking back down the aisles past a couple that I knew were pretty good. It was actually my 4 year old that spotted the one, and she made the final decision for us. So we were able to very quickly kind of shift gears from the first one that we saw into an awesome one. It's one of my favorites that we've gotten in a while. It's a really nice tree. So kudos to my 4-year-old for being able to make that happen.
Very nice. Yeah, no, I love that time of year going out and getting the Christmas tree. It's always a fun time for sure. All right, so
Yeah.
this episode is supposed to be about gear, so I guess we should probably talk about some gear here, right? So
Yep.
gear, as we're gonna talk about the gear that you need, right? We're gonna try and pare down. If you're starting from scratch, you don't have anything. These are the things that you need in order to get yourself into the woods, and then also maybe some extra things that may or may not be a little bit more beneficial if you have them, right? And like anything else, it can be as simple or as complicated as you make it, right? I mean, there is so much stuff you can buy that's going to help you out. People are going to sell you this and that, but ultimately, we're trying to pare this down to the essentials here, and that's kind of what we're going to be talking about for the most part. Um, this is mostly to show you that you don't need like everything, every single thing in order to get out there. The most important thing is to just get out there, have some fun, start experiencing the outdoors, and kind of go from there. Ultimately, you're going to develop your own style. You're going to develop your own needs the more time you spend out there. And I think that that's ultimately the most important aspect of it.
Yeah, and I'll say just to kind of give everybody that's listening at home a glimpse behind the curtain, like this is one that at least for me, I've never wanted to really dive into like the name brands or like the product placement of different brands that this one's better than that one, and if you spend a little bit more money on this versus that, like you'll be able to have a better experience or you'll be able to have more luck because that's really not what it is that we're about. And so rather than kind of like getting into like specific products or specific brands that we're trying to kind of promote, because believe me, we're not. We don't have like brands that we're getting any sort of like kickback from in terms of funds or anything like that. But there, and as you were saying, Pat, as I've been making my way through some outdoor sports, I have found that brands aside, there is gear that makes a big difference, and we're going to be talking this episode about some of that gear that's kind of like the bare essentials and that minimalistic. But at the same time, if you do end up choosing to kind of figure out what works well for you, what it is that you fish with well, what it is that you hunt with well, as you kind of learn about more gear, you can have more fun. And so I think ultimately, rather than talking about brands that you got to go right out and get, or different, we're close to Christmas time, like Christmas presents
Hmm.
that you should be asking for in terms of products and gear like that, rather than talking about the different products, I'd rather talk about the essential gear and the difference that gear can make. And I think that if we do that, hopefully by design, again, kind of lifting up the curtain here, hopefully by design, it'll be something that you all listening at home can benefit from.
Yeah, totally agree with that one, Mike, for sure. All right. So first we're going to talk about hunting, since that's ultimately my passion, and I'm going first. So that's what we're going to talk about first. Um, the first thing, obviously, you're starting from scratch. You don't have anything. Obviously, you're going to need to wear something, right? And you look in the magazines and you see all these people decked out in like full camo, right? And ultimately speaking, you don't need camo. It's not that important. If you go out into the woods in earth tones and browns, greens, blacks, stuff like that, generally
Yeah.
speaking, if you keep some amount of cover between you and wherever you think the animal is going to be, you stick to, you're not standing right out in the open, you're going to be fine. You don't need to drop hundreds of dollars on camo in order to be successful. You don't. Ultimately,
Yeah.
just the fact being in the woods is the most important. Now, I will say that deer's eyes, the way they're, ultimately biologically designed, are very sensitive to blue. So, if you are planning on, not wearing camo, if you're wearing colors in the woods, right, try and avoid blue because it's going to stick out to their eyes more so than other colors. And that's just more of a FYI. Now, on the contrary to that, like reds and oranges, they can't see them. That's why hunters wear blaze orange in the woods. The deer perceives blaze orange as kind of like a light brown. So to the human eye, it's like super bright, but for the deer, it's like very muted, very like light brown kind of color, totally blends in with the background. So not really a concern in that regard at all. So just for the as far as clothing goes, get yourself some khaki colored pants and a brown hooded sweatshirt, and you're going to be pretty much good to go as far as colors are concerned.
That is so fascinating about the color blue. Now, obviously, I grew up in a family and seeing even just the family hunting pictures of everybody wearing the bright red and like the bright orange. I obviously knew that that's something that the deer can't see, and also on the flip side of that, it's very easy for the hunters to see. So
Hmm.
for safety reasons, it's pretty evident why it is that that would be the case. But I never knew about I never knew about the fact that they can distinctly see blue. That's really interesting. That's really fascinating.
Yep, exactly. And I guess like it should be noted also that certain states have regulations around wearing blaze orange during certain seasons, right? So I mean, at least in Massachusetts, right, during the shotgun and muzzleloader seasons, you have to be wearing a certain amount of blaze orange to be hunting in the woods. It's part of the requirement. So I
Right.
guess make sure you're following up on your state regulations if you're planning on hunting during those seasons. But yeah, as far as clothing colors, I mean, ultimately, it isn't going to matter that much. What's more important is being not being downwind of the deer, trying to maintain your cover. All those things are going to be more important than the clothing, specific clothing colors that you're going to be wearing. As far as, for temperatures, right? So obviously the hunting season spans a relatively wide range. You're talking about hunting in September all the way up into, in some instances, in some states, through January. So you can run into in the beginning part of the season temperatures potentially in the 70s and 80s, whereas in the later portion of the season you're going to be talking about temperatures that could be well below freezing. So being able to, have some things that you can wear for both of those types of seasons would be helpful as well. Now, ultimately, as a person growing up in these climates, you should have some amount of clothes that's going to work, right? If you have, I mean, warm weather is uh, a little bit easier in some regards, right? You want something that's going to wick your sweat away to keep you a little bit cooler. Generally, you do want to try and cover up this, your skin, just because it's a little bit like brighter color. It's going to reflect a little bit more than a clothing would. But other than that, it's not going. It's more about trying to maintain not getting yourself too warm on those warm weather hunts. When it gets to colder weather, I think developing some sort of layering system is helpful. Now, if you've ever gone skiing or anything like that, or done any, like, let's say, sledding, something like that, generally speaking, you're going to have some amount of cold weather clothing, some long underwear, some waffle weave shirts, anything like that is going to be beneficial if you're just going to try and use what you have at home before going hunting. As far as jackets are concerned, bulky jackets can sometimes be okay depending on what it looks like, but you're as far as like bulking yourself up, you do want to make sure you can still draw your bow appropriately. Um, but yeah, ultimately that's kind of it as far as what you need for clothing. There's nothing too special there. Footwear, I would recommend a pair of boots, just to try and keep your feet warm, to be able to move your feet around as you're walking through sticks and stuff like that. But really, once again, if you're growing up in the appropriate climate anyway, right, you're gonna have some sort of boots. Those are probably gonna be fine. You don't have to break the bank making sure you're buying the new latest and greatest boots, but at the same time, you want something that's going to be comfortable. You want something that's going to make sure your feet aren't too uh, aren't too hot or too cold, and so on. Mike,
Yeah,
what do
and
you think
from
about that?
somebody from well, from as somebody from the top of the episode who was talking about how my feet were getting soaked through because they weren't waterproof, I will say that like those are the types of things that just purchasing a waterproof pair of boots that can go a long way. That's the type of thing that can totally transform your hunting experience and take something that would otherwise be miserable, and make it something that's really enjoyable. So those little things there, and that doesn't just go for hunting. That goes for hiking. That goes for just being a person who's going to an NFL football game in an outdoor stadium. Like these are things that truly can that can help you out. So it's those types of things where like that one purchase can go a long way in not just your comfort but in your kind of enjoyment of the outdoor experience as well.
Yeah, totally. So then, as far as hunting goes, right? I mean, you're not just going for a hike in these cold or warm weathers. There's also the aspect of actually hunting and chasing down an animal, and for that, you're going to need some sort of weapon. Now, in this area as well as most other states, I believe like archery hunting, bow hunting, or in some instances crossbow is going to be the easiest to get into. Right? There's a little bit less expensive as far as purchasing the equipment.
Hmm.
There's no like permitting that's required, right? So many states require some amount of permits for owning a gun. There's nothing that you need to do as far as that is concerned. Many states you don't have to take any courses as far as purchasing a bow. So you can have a bow, you can practice if you have a big enough yard, you can practice with it at home, get proficient with it. Like depending on what your basement looks like in your house, you could potentially practice in your basement. But I mean, I think that's relatively inexpensive, allows for optimal opportunity for being able to practice and be consistent with that if you're just looking to just get started in that regard. And as far as accuracy is concerned, yes, like bow hunting is challenging for sure. I mean, you have to get a lot closer to the animal, but if a crossbow is something that is legal within your state, it is something that you can purchase and use. Crossbow efficacy is out to probably about 100 yards if you have the opportunity, which then is much. Allows for more opportunities on the animal as well, right? You don't have to get quite as close. You don't have to be quite as sneaky or good with your scent control in order to get within striking distance of that animal. That
Yeah.
crossbow allows for that opportunity to occur at say 80 yards instead of having to get that animal all the way to 20 yards, depending on your situation, right? I mean, you still have sticks and things. In the places I hunt, I don't know if I would ever be able to get an 80-yard shot. But it does allow for a little bit more accuracy, and in some people it'll allow them to get accurate quicker, right? I'm not condoning going out there
Right.
without practicing, but at the same time, it does allow for a more accurate shot at a longer range. So there's something to be said about that for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and again, Pat and I grew up in a house where our dad was a seasoned hunter and would hunt every year, and had a lot of experience bow hunting as well as rifle hunting, and now that Pat has his license and I'm in the process of getting my hunting license, I think back to those memories that we had both up at the hunting camp but also just in our backyard, when our dad would take us out and have the target out, and we'd take the bow and arrow out and practice archery and practice shooting at the target. And it's one of those things where I'm now learning that it's not just something that dad was looking for us to do to get us to like get out of the house, though there's certainly an aspect of that as well in parenting,
For
but
sure.
it's something that he loved, and it's a craft that he loved, and it's a lifelong craft that he wanted to kind of share with us as well. And so I can remember being out in our backyard and being up at the camp, and having the target out and working on our aim and working on our archery. And both of us, both you and I, Pat, both have compound bows, and
Mhm.
it's one of those things that it's kind of it's a it's a craft, and it's a craft of love, and it's one that dad certainly wanted to share with us. And it's one that we have a podcast that we're talking about things like this. So it's definitely something that he's kind of bestowed on us, and I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, for sure. No, I totally agree. And I mean, I I don't think it would be I would be as passionate about it now if didn't have that experience of shooting the bow in the backyard growing up. So
Yeah, yeah.
definitely thankful for that. Um, but in addition to that, something else that would be, I would say, critical at this stage of the game would be some sort of mapping app or a compass. Now, I utilize both, right? I have a compass in my bag all the time. It's always there. It's as a backup. Compasses are critical if you're going to be venturing out into the woods and off the trail. However, there are a lot of really good mapping apps right now. These are kind of mapping apps like Onyx or Hunt Stand or Spartan Forge, all great apps that are allow you. It's basically like Google Maps for the woods. So obviously, everybody knows Google Maps, right? You can basically type in an address, it's gonna like walk you there. Well, I mean, these mapping apps are good enough at this stage to basically you can put a pin down on a map and it'll more or less direct you exactly where you want to go, which is huge for providing additional confidence as you're walking in the woods off trail and not really knowing where you're going. It gives you that confidence to know that when you step off the trail, you're not going to get totally lost and turned around to the point where you're not going to be able to make it back to the car. You're always going to be able to make it back because you have either that mapping app or the compass. Now, I
Right.
will say there is, mapping apps do have their faults. If they lose service or they're showing you a
Yeah.
direction where you're going, but you're actually going in a different direction, right? The accuracy is off for some reason. That can obviously
Mhm.
be a challenge, right? You think you're going north, you're actually going south. I mean, that's not a good situation to be in. So that's why I always have a compass in my bag as well,
Yeah.
because it's great as that double check. If you think something looks off with how you're walking with
Yeah.
that mapping app, having that compass to be able to verify, I am actually walking east right now, even though it doesn't feel like I'm walking east. Because it is surprising how turned around you can get in the woods so
Oh,
quickly.
for sure.
Like you
Yeah.
think you're walking in a straight line and all of a sudden somehow you're walking west when you think you're supposed to be walking or when you think you're walking south, right? And it's like it's crazy how quickly that can happen, and I find it happening to myself even with the mapping apps and the compass every season. I look up and the map is telling me to go like take a left and I'm like, "No, I definitely don't, I'm not taking a left here. I need to go straight." And I'll take out my compass and it'll be like, nope, the mapping app was right. I needed I need to take that
Yeah.
left. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of funny how those things are, and it also speaks to the importance. You think that you know exactly where you're
Mhm.
going. You think, yeah, I've walked that to that tree stand 100 times. I don't need to take my compass out or my mapping app out. I can do it. But ultimately, you end up getting turned around, and then you have to take it out anyway. It takes time, and then
Yeah.
you're set back in that regard.
Yeah, it's one of those things where then you have it to be able to cross-reference, and you're able to keep yourself even just a little bit safer than than just being dependent upon that map app if you've got that compass that's there. And there's always, and I mean, I do think that again, we grew up in a household where like maps were a frequency.
Hmm.
We needed to and we also grew up at a time before when like map apps were really being used all like with complete like confidence
Hmm.
when it came to driving around. I can remember driving to places when I was in high school and having the map of like Massachusetts and New Hampshire in the back of our car just in case we needed to like find a road or needed to find our way to a friend's house, or if we ended up getting lost. And I can remember pulling into some parking lots of some pizza places and needing to pull out that map in order to be able to figure like find my way. This was a time before like we really were using the map apps on our phone. And so I know, Pat, that you and I grew up in a time where like maps and compasses were something that we needed to learn how to use. And as a result of that, I will say that I think that I've got a pretty good sense of direction. I will say that there, even with that though, as you're mentioning, as you're alluding to, there's still that human error and there's still that human intuition. And I do think that I have a really strong sense of direction, but every now and then there's a couple of roads even down here in Atlanta, Georgia, where I know from looking at them on a map, I know from looking at them even on my phone that this is a road that's running north and south. And yet, like, I can't wrap my head around how I can be leaving the perimeter, like traveling east, and all of a sudden I'm on this road and this road has bent its way to being north and south. Like I can't wrap my head around it. There's a couple of those there's a couple of roads where I cannot figure it out. I can't figure out how 141 in Georgia is running north and south. Like in my brain, in my I do think very strong sense of direction. That damn road is running east to west, and I can't wrap my head around it. And I've seen it on the map so many times, and yet I can't figure out how if I'm traveling east and west when I'm on 285, how when I'm taking that dead left to get onto 141, how am I now traveling like in a totally different direction, right? And I can't wrap my head around it. But to your point, there's that error, there's that human error, there's that human intuition, that map apps and those compasses can help you cross reference, and it's all to keep you safer, right? It's all to help you know where you are when you're in the woods, and so anything that can do that is definitely good in my book.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And on that note, as far as keeping you safe, another thing I always have in my pack, and I also recommend having, would be some sort of like emergency kit in your pack. Now, it doesn't have to have all that much stuff, but I would say, for starters, like some food, some sort of fire starter, a knife, a flashlight, maybe some paracord, just some stuff in there to, let's say you get injured in the woods and there's some you need to for some reason spend the night in the woods. It's just enough to get you by as far as food is concerned, as far as starting a fire to get yourself warm, just
Right.
enough to get you by, right? And I think that a lot of people go into the woods and they don't necessarily consider that. And I think every time I head off into the woods, I don't expect to have to stay the night in the woods, but I kind of half plan for it, right? Like if I step out of the vehicle and I step into the woods off the trail and I have to spend the night in the woods, would I be okay? That's always kind of the question that I ask myself. And, and I make sure that I have enough in my pack to be able to do that. Now, granted, enough for one night in the woods. I mean, you don't necessarily need that much, but I mean, ultimately, let's say it's going to be 30 degrees overnight or it's going to be below zero overnight. Well, some of those things change, right? You want to make sure you have enough to make sure that you're safe when you're stepping off the trail. And I think having
Right.
some sort of an emergency pack helps you along with that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Mhm.
In addition to that, I mean, so that's pretty much rounds out what we would say are like, let's say, our requirements, right? So obviously, you need a weapon, you need some clothes that are going to get you into the woods, you need an emergency pack in case something goes wrong, and you need some sort of either mapping app or compass to make sure that you're not going to get lost as you're making your way into the woods. But then there are a few things that are going to make life a little bit easier for you as you're starting this hunting journey. The first one I would say is going to be a tree stand. You don't certainly don't need a tree stand to be successful hunting. You can obviously be doing tracking. You could do still hunting. Any of those things are super can work really well for people. I When I first started hunting, I started hunting off the ground, and I did. You could either sit underneath a tree, you can lean up against a tree, find yourself some nice cover, and that's going to allow you to be able to hide yourself away and potentially see a deer. But shortly after starting my hunting career, I did transition to using a tree stand, and that's for a few different reasons. One, it's going to lift your scent up off the ground, which is going to be helpful for you in the sense that the deer aren't going to smell you quite as quickly if they're nearing you. Also, as far as lifting you up, it lifts you out of the deer's direct line of sight, which is also beneficial as well, right? If that deer is walking around or rounding a corner and they're not going to see you immediately, instead, they're not going to be able to see you. They're going to have to look up in order to do that. And also, probably the biggest advantage I would say of the tree stand is it allows you to be able to see. Now, if you're on the ground in thick cover, which is where the deer are going to be, you're going to maybe be able to see 5 or 10 yards in front of you, at least in the areas that I'm usually hunting. Now, if you put yourself up into a tree stand in that exact same spot, now instead of being able to see 5 to 10 yards in front of you, you can see, probably about 100 yards in front of you. And that's just increasing your opportunity to be able to see a deer substantially, right? So I think that's really kind of the biggest advantage of having that, of being up in that tree stand.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I always think about it as I've always thought about it in terms of that visibility. I hadn't thought about it in regards to lifting your scent. That's really interesting that it's not going to be quite as easy for the deer to peg you in terms of your scent as a result of being up there. And I would imagine it also makes for a more advantageous shot at deer as well. If you've got a little bit more height, it would, I would imagine, make things a little bit cleaner in terms of the shot that it is that you're taking. Would that be true as well?
Yeah, definitely the case. I mean, to some degree. Now, if you're high enough up and the deer is far enough below you, then you can run into challenges as far as shot angle, right? If the deer is standing
Right.
almost directly below you and you have to shoot underneath your feet, that becomes a bit of a challenge, right? Because you're shooting right down into the deer. The vital area is much smaller in that regard, and you're shooting like straight down, which is not something a lot of people practice. However, for most shots, let's say anything from like 10 to 10 yards out, you there is a significant advantage because instead of having to shoot through that brush, you're kind of shooting over it. So there's much less brush
Right.
that your arrow is going to have to potentially go through or around, to in order to get to that deer, which is certainly an advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And then, other than that, another couple things that I would say I would recommend is one is a thermoset. It's basically just like a thick piece of foam that you can use as your seat. Now, I used to just use like the tree stand seats that they come with. I've kind of transitioned to these thermosets because one, they keep your bum a little bit warmer. Two, if you're sitting on the ground, I mean, they keep you much warmer than sitting on like a tarp or a blanket because that ground is just gonna suck your temperature away. You're just gonna get
Yeah.
colder and colder there. And also, with the thermoset that I have, if I'm using a saddle, I'll strap it around the tree so that my knees can hit that thermoset instead of hit against the tree, which is makes my knees more comfortable and also kind of warms up my knees because that thermoset's made of a material that kind of it's insulated as well, so it kind of keeps you just a little bit warmer, which is nice. And
Yeah.
the last thing I would recommend is a set of binoculars. Now, I don't use my binoculars all that much. The areas I hunt are like really heavily wooded, so really anything outside of like 50 yards or so, it just becomes kind of a mess of sticks as far as what I'm looking at. But it does allow you to kind of pick apart specific areas with them. So, an area that you would see with your bare eyes just looks like a bunch of sticks. The binoculars allows you to kind of piece through and dissect that area into smaller chunks and potentially be able to pick out a deer that you wouldn't be able to see with your naked eye. So, especially when bow hunting, I think having a pair of binoculars is super beneficial for that as well. So,
Yeah.
that and that's gonna kind of round out what I would say is our things that we would need baseline in order to do some sort of hunting. So, Mike, I would say if you were going hunting, needed to go hunting right now, do you think you have what you need in order to make that happen?
I do think that I do. In fact, the just like a week or so ago, I was at my in-laws around Thanksgiving time, and they had mentioned that they have a compound bow that my brother-in-law had down in the basement, and they still
Really?
have it. They still
No
have it
way.
in its case down in the basement of their house.
Oh, that's
And so
cool.
there I am, and I'm there for Thanksgiving. I'm like, well, we can go down right now. Do you want to? Do you want to? Part of me wants to actually see this. So if I were to be going hunting right now, and I mean, I don't, I don't have like a rifle.
Mhm.
I think that if I were to be going hunting right now, I would prefer actually to go bow hunting. And I think that the season, likely the next time that I go hunting, will probably be bow hunting
Mhm.
rather than rifle. And I think that the season is longer. It's a little bit easier and lines up a little bit better with what it is that I would want to be doing.
Mhm.
And for all the same reasons that I talk about, and I'll get into them in just a little bit here when it comes to fishing, like wanting to be one of the liking the notion of the hunt and liking the notion of kind of like the setting off to catch a fish. And we talk all the time about being right and kind of like doing your homework and
Mhm.
scoping out the area. For all of those reasons, it's challenging to be able to get yourself close enough to be able to bow hunt. And when I'm going out there, not looking to not needing to get a deer in order to be able to put food on the table,
Mhm.
I'm in a position to be able to make the most of that hunt and that hunting experience if I'm out there bow hunting. So
Mhm.
I do think that it would be bow hunting, certainly would be the way that I'd be going about it. Whether that's the compound bow that I have from when I was younger, that I think might still be stashed under my childhood bed at home, or if that's the bow that's down in the basement of my in-laws. Nevertheless, I do think that it would be bow hunting. Now, when it comes to clothes, I now know not to wear blue, but warm enough clothes to keep myself in a comfortable position, especially after that trip up to MetLife Stadium up in New York. Definitely going to want to make sure that I have some nice warm socks, some nice waterproof boots, but warm clothes for sure. And then one thing that we hadn't talked quite as much about in terms of essentials, I always want to snack when I'm out there. So something that's going to be
Nice.
something that's not going to be too fragrant. I'm partial to my chunky peanut butter and banana sandwich. Usually on rye, sometimes on a bagel, dependent, but something that would be something that I could have like as a snack there. But just pretty much bare essentials, right? And this is an episode where we're kind of talking about those bare essentials. That's pretty much what I would want to keep it to, if I were to be going out. And the next time that I'm going out, again, I'm in the process of getting my hunting license. So the next time that I'm going out, hopefully it's with those bare essentials in mind.
Nice. Yeah. No. And in addition to that, I mean, I would just say that if you are starting out and you are wanting to get into hunting or something like this, where you haven't done it before, try and find yourself a mentor. You know, somebody who
Yeah,
knows a little. If you're truly by on your own, you haven't done this before, you're looking to try and start this something new. Having a mentor, somebody who you can bounce these questions off of and ask, what would be some good clothes, what would be a good bow, what would be a good compass, or how do I use this. Having that resource is invaluable. So make sure that that is something that you pursue if you are trying to go it alone for the first time. So I think that's also important.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And well, I hopefully, Pat, this is you saying that you're willing to be my mentor in that regard, because I'm in need of one of those, or rather, I would be in need of one of those were it not for you.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna consider that your application for being my mentor, and congratulations, Pat, you've been accepted. You're gonna be my hunting mentor. So there you have it there.
Of course, I'll be your mentor. I'd love to, and nothing pleases me more than being able to talk about more hunting stuff. So really, that was ultimately the plan for this whole podcast. So
Yes,
we've succeeded in that regard.
yes,
All right,
yeah.
fishing
Yeah,
stuff.
well,
We're into fishing now. We've moved through hunting. We've talked about the essentials that we need in order to get out into the woods for hunting. How does that hold as far as fishing? What are the essentials that are needed in order for that to happen?
yeah, and again, we're talking kind of like bare minimum here, but also some of those bare minimums that can make for a much more enjoyable experience for you.
Hmm.
So, when it comes to clothing, once again, a little bit goes a long way, especially in you can kind of be fishing depending on where you live, depending on where you are. You can be fishing in the cold, you can be fishing in the warmth and in the heat, and you can find some success. And so being able to get yourself in appropriate clothing is really important. So when it's when it's cold out, it's warmth becomes the priority, right? And so not only warmth, but staying dry becomes a priority as well. I think back to like a late January, early February trip that I did up on Lake Hartwell. And it was a guided trip. And so I was out there and I had on like long, fairly waterproof like sweatpants, and then a thermal jacket that I got. It was a jacket that I actually ended up getting when I was coaching track, and it's
Hmm.
like totally waterproof. It's got a hood and everything, and I was still cold as we're zipping around on this pontoon boat. And so being able to stay warm, that was one day that I was dressed appropriately, and I'm glad that I was, because it was it was chilly out there, and
Hmm.
it would have been a far less enjoyable experience if I didn't have that appropriate gear, and if I wasn't able to stay warm. Now that's a jacket that I got for coaching, not necessarily for fishing, but you can kind of overlap the two. You know, you
Yeah.
don't have to go out there and buy a professional grade fishing gear jacket in order to be able to keep yourself warm. So
Hmm.
I'm gonna kind of continue to be beating that drum, where you don't need to be going off of like these name brands and spending all of this money. Like, kind of just use your common sense, and if you're going to be more comfortable being warm, do whatever it is that you can to keep yourself warm.
Hmm.
And on top of that, like, fashion kind of goes out the window, right? This jacket that I got for coaching, it's this like huge bulky jacket that I'm maneuverable enough in to be able to
Hmm.
coach, but also to be able to fish. And I'm not looking to be on the cover of like the Ralph Lauren like magazine or anything like that, right? Like the fish don't care what it is that I'm catching
Nope.
them wearing, and nor should they, right? So it when it comes down to it, being able to be warm is way more important than being fashionable. And the same thing goes for in the heat. That's something that I experience a lot more. A lot of the fishing that I do is during the summer, and so being able to beat the heat, especially when I'm going out there during the day, being able to have something that's breathable is a lot more important than being able to have something that's fashionable. And so there's nothing worse than being out there and now you're too hot, and you're stripping down layers, and you're down to something that's not waterproof because what it was that you were wearing on the as your exterior layer wasn't breathable enough, so you got to take it off, right? So being able to have something that's breathable becomes the priority when it comes to clothing, when it's on the warmer side, which again is what it is that I experience more often than not. Um, Something that is really important is, and you can't fish without this, Pat, is water access. And your level of water access, obviously, you need to be able to have a body of water that has fish in it if you're going to be successful fishing.
Well, yeah,
But
I suppose
your
that makes sense that you need fish in the water in order to catch them.
right, right, exactly. And so that level of access that you have can change your success, and it can change your enjoyment too. And just that you have more access to water doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be enjoying it more either. And so being able to have access to the water, I think back to like the pond that was by our house, Pat. We were always just kind of fishing from the shore, right? And
Hmm.
so we had limited access, but we had a ton of fun with that limited access
Yeah.
because we had access to the water. We were able to get our line to where the fish were, and so being able to kind of like station ourselves out on that bridge, or out on in a place that we were able to be able to catch fish, that was something that we had enough access to be able to enjoy ourselves. I have yet to catch a fish from the dock at the lake house that I go to every single summer up on Lake Kiwi. I've never caught one from the dock. And I've fished a lot from the dock, but I've
Really?
never caught one from the dock. And so it's one of those things where my access and my enjoyment comes a lot from being able to take out a kayak or a canoe.
Hmm.
And so then with that, I'm able to get to some of the places that I've scoped out, some of the places that I really enjoy fishing, being able to get to a couple of different points, some places that have some really steep drop offs that I think there's going to be a higher concentration of fish. I have a lot more fun when I have more access to more of the lake. And so for me, that means being able to have a kayak or a canoe. You can get yourself an inexpensive kayak or a canoe. Now, I'm I will say I've sat in this chair and I've talked a lot about the inexpensive, like $70 inflatable kayaks that always end up puncturing a hole, or you could spend like 100 or $150 and get yourself a hard-bodied kayak or a canoe that you can that's a little bit more reliable. And so it's one of those places where, listen, those of you listening at home, I have spent I will not knock you if you want to get an inflatable kayak. I have three of them in my garage right now. One of them I'm probably going to end up taking out this summer. It's a new brand. It's a new it's a new set of gear. We ended the summer, and I think one of the renters that was renting out the lake house had like brought it up. I have confirmed that there is not a hole in it, and so I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be bringing it out this summer. But if you do choose to spend a little bit more money, it's one of those places where spending a little bit more money can get you a little bit more reliable access to the water. And I was at first when I made my purchase, I bought the brand is Lifetime. Quest has some pretty inexpensive ones that are hard body as well. Again, this is not name or like brand dropping here. This is just those that I've done a little bit of like some research into that I've had some success with. But my in-laws just bought a set of sit on top kayaks. I was against them at first because I thought that they were going to be really tippy.
Mhm.
But you can get yourself an inexpensive. I think the ones that they got were like $150 or something like that. It was a Pelican sit on top kayak, and the thing's probably about like 6 feet or so, 6 to 7 feet, and it's really sturdy. And I did all of my fishing this past summer out on that Pelican sit on top kayak, and so you can get yourself something that's reliable and gain yourself some access to different parts of a lake, and for me that ups the enjoyment quite a bit.
Yeah.
And for me, especially on Lake Kiwi, where I haven't had any success fishing from the docks, and I've had tremendous success being able to get out to a couple of points and to a couple of different places on the lake. That certainly being able to have that water access a little bit goes a long way there.
Yeah.
When
I
it
would
comes to
say
my to when it
I
yeah
would
yeah
say
yeah
that no, as water access, I mean, I think you're totally right. You got to get to the places where the fish are, and having a kayak or a canoe or some sort of vessel to be able to do that certainly helps and allows you to, one, get to more of those places quickly, and two, also be able to do it. To get to a lot of different places, right? That's like
yeah
the huge benefit of having some sort of water vessel, but not having something on the water doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get to those locations. I mean, in some instances it does, right? I
hmm
mean, if you're talking about somebody's backyard, right, clearly you're not going to be able to walk through that person's yard in order to fish off the bank and catch those fish, right? But there are, potential opportunities. Bank casting, it just involves a little bit more work, right? Instead of being able to paddle right to where you want to go, you're going to have to walk potentially around an entire lake to get to a place that you want to be able to fish.
right
Which, then you get there, it may or may not even be successful, right? So there's a lot more work that's involved with that. But that being said, I've caught plenty of fish from the bank.
yeah
It can certainly be successful. It just adds, one, it's an additional challenge, and two, obviously you're going to be able to hit a lot of more of those places from a different angle and from a specific angle that you want if you're in a kayak or canoe. So that's certainly an advantage there for sure.
yeah yeah absolutely. And it's sometimes it can be like a deterrent, and
Hmm.
you're talking about how it can be a bit of a challenge, and you have to kind of do some workarounds in order to be able to make it happen. But for me, sometimes it's equally a challenge to be able to get the kayak down, to be able to get it on top of the
Hmm.
car. I'm pretty far from, well, not pretty, I have access within like a 40 or 45-minute drive to a couple of lakes that I do like to fish, but I mean that's still a drive. You're still driving out there to a put in point, and so for me, sometimes that can be the deterrent. And
Hmm.
yet, a couple of weeks ago, I found myself on the banks of the Chattahoochee River, getting a line into the Chattahoochee River and doing some fishing because of the fact that I wasn't dependent upon that watercraft,
Mhm.
and I had water access that was close to me that I just said, you know what, screw it, I'm gonna get a line in the water.
Mhm.
And so sometimes that can be a little bit kind of alleviating in a
Yeah,
way to be
for
able
sure.
to be able to not have to rely on that kind of watercraft.
Definitely.
Um, when it comes to kind of like the actual gear that you need to be able to fish, your rod and your line are two that are pretty necessary. Being able to cast and retrieve with a reel is I mean that's typically what it is that you think of when you're fishing. What I've done, I've gone through in let's say over the course of the last 5 years or so, I've gone through three different fishing poles. Again, the brand I don't think is as important as like the length. I like a medium length that's got some bend to it, and so when I'm in need of another fishing pole, I'll go out to just like a well stocked Walmart, or I'll go out to like a Dick's Sporting Goods or something like that, and I'll just look for whatever it is that's in the right length that it is that I'm looking for. That's got a little bit of a bend to it. That's on sale. When I go out to Walmart every now and then, they'll have some that they'll sell that come with like a little like half stocked tackle box. So I'll get a couple of lures and stuff that'll go along with that as well. And every now and then they'll have some deals on some like half priced rods, and they come with a little tackle box that's got some more lures that I can play around with and
Mhm.
try. So I I'm always more for kind of the practicality more so than the name brand.
Mhm.
Shimano and Jawbone are the two that I have right now,
Mhm.
and neither one of those rods cost me more than, I think they were on sale for like $40 with their reel and with all like ready to fish. And so
Nice.
for me, it's not about breaking the bank. It's more about kind of like that practicality.
Mhm.
I've caught tons of fish on both of those poles. I've caught tons of fish on lots of different poles, but those are two that I currently have in my garage right
Mhm.
now. That I'll take one or both of them out whenever I'm fishing. When it comes to the fishing line, you just need something that's going to be able to be, I don't know. I like trolling at about 60 to 70 feet behind my kayak. There is kind of like the rule of 100, which is that your, and this is something that I saw recently that some fishermen swear by, that like the length of your line should be, if you were to add the length of your line to the depth in feet, it should equal 100.
Hmm.
So a lot of times the lake that I'm fishing out at Lake Kiwi, sometimes out at Lake Hartwell, it's about like 30 feet or so, and so I like having my line out at like 60 to 70 feet behind the back of my kayak as I'm going around and trolling. Um, it's what works for me. It's about two and a half first downs. It's about two and a half, like 25 yards or so behind, out behind the kayak, and I found that has worked for me. But the line itself, I've been using a lot more braided line, and I know I've talked about this on
Mhm.
podcasts before, but you can find inexpensive braided line. You can it's all kind of what it is that you find and what it is that you want to pay for. Like you can't really find a reel of line for much less than like 10 or $15, and you can find braided line for 10 or $15.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can also find it for 20, you can find it for 25, but like a braided line, and what I like about it is it doesn't tangle as
Mhm.
much. And that can be so nice when you know that you're casting and you're not going to end up with it tangling. It does fly and it does cast well, but regular line flies and casts well too, but it doesn't tangle as much, and I don't end up with that like that rat's nest in my reel that I want to be able to cast, and it keeps ending up getting like caught. And so I
Mhm.
need to be able to cast at, let's say, like 35 or 40 feet, and I'm coming up short because I've got a knot in my reel. You
Mhm.
know, it keeps me from finding myself in that frustrating of a situation. And so the line being braided has certainly helped with that. When it comes to the last thing, though, if you just have your line and you just have your rod, you're not catching any fish. You need a hook and you need a lure or you need bait to put on the end of it. So the simplest and most primitive is just a hook and bait. And honestly, it's probably the most successful. Live bait is really, really good when you're trying to catch fish, but being able to have access to live bait is not always easy. You need a
Hmm.
live well. You need to be able to keep those fish alive when you're going fishing. You need to stop off at a bait shop. If unless you're harvesting your own bait, which is a rarity, certainly not within my funds to be able to be able to do something like that. So if that's not the case, being able to have access to live bait makes things a little bit trickier. So even though it's more primitive, I find that I do a lot more fishing with what it is that I can keep in my tackle box. And so those Rapala, shad, crankbaits, those false minnows, it's what I do far and beyond the most fishing with. You can troll with them, you can cast and retrieve with them. They're not that expensive. They're $5 or $6, and you can fill your tackle box with them. You can even do some kayaking or canoeing around and go through some of the overhanging trees and fill your tackle box with
Hmm.
some that you just fish out of the trees of people that didn't want to go and lose time fishing when they got some caught in the trees. So being able to have lures goes a long way.
Hmm.
Um, right, because trying to fish with a hook without any bait doesn't do you any good. And so um that is one way that I do a lot of my fishing is with these lures. And that's where you can kind of play around a little bit. You can spend a little bit more and buy yourself a 10 or a $15 whopper plopper, and you can kind of, if you choose to do that, you can make your way out there in that regard. But actually, what I want to do is get myself even a little bit more primitive. I talk a lot about fishing the point up on Lake Kiwi
Hmm.
and fishing a couple of places like that plateau that I really like on Lake Lanier. But I wanna get out there with some more live bait, and I don't know why it hasn't dawned on me before, but I'm making it kind of like my goal to get out there to some of my more frequent spots that I do a lot of casting and retrieving. Instead of casting and retrieving with my normal crankbait, I want to get out there with some worms, and I
Hmm.
want to get out there with some live bait. And a lot of the fishing that I do, when I think about live bait, I think about minnows, right? Because that's what I
Hmm.
do when I go to Lake Hartwell. That's what
Yeah.
I do when I go to Lake Kiwi or to Lake Lanier. And I've had success with that. But Pat, we've fished way more up in Massachusetts. We fish with worms,
Hmm.
and we've had great success with that. You put a worm on a weighted hook, and you throw a bobber out there. And I know enough of the waters in some of these lakes that I've been fishing to know where the fish are.
Hmm.
And so I can't help but wonder if I go out there in a kayak or a canoe with two poles and I send them out there with a bobber, with a little bit of line, with some live bait, with some worms. I can't help but wonder if I'm going to be successful. Now, that could be worms that I get from a bait shop if I get them in kind of like a dirt cup, or maybe I bring the nieces and nephews and my kids out there, and we dig up some rocks in the yard that's surrounding the lake house, and I
Hmm.
get myself some worms to be able to do some live fishing with, some
Yeah.
some live bait fishing.
No,
So
I think
I
that would
really
definitely
I'm
work.
excited about that.
I think that
Yeah.
would definitely work. I mean, you're saying you're kind of half joking about digging up worms in the yard, but ultimately, the worms in the yard are the exact same worms that those fish are going to be eating in the lake, right? So ultimately, I think those would
Yep.
actually be really, really successful, especially if you're talking about. I mean, I don't know the specifics of the points you're trying to fish, but if there are any overhanging branches or anything like that,
Yep.
I think if fishing a worm under a bobber in that situation would probably work really well.
Yeah, and I mean, I know you've come up to Lake Kiwi. My father-in-law and I love to point out the spot where you caught a nice spotted bass off of a fake worm. So
Yeah,
there's precedence for this. I can't
exactly.
remember if it was power bait, if it was Konami or what,
Hmm.
but you caught a nice fish off of a fake worm,
Hmm.
right on an overhanging spot on a point, just like I'm talking about here. So I do think that it would be successful. And so that kind of brings it to a close, my fishing section here. But for one last thing that I didn't have on my list, that as I was going through some of these bare essentials, one thing that you got to bring out there is a good set of pliers.
Hmm.
My goodness, if I didn't have a good set of pliers when I was out there in my tackle box, I would be in trouble. I struggle, and I really struggle to get a hook out of a fish's mouth if I don't have a set of pliers
Hmm.
now. I'm reliant on a set of pliers to be able to get that hook out of the fish's mouth. I know right where to hold a spotted bass where on its gills to be able to get that plier in there in order to be able to get it out very successfully to be able to get that fish back into the water. But if I didn't have a good set of pliers, I might end up eating more fish because I can't get them back into the lake without getting them off the line.
Yeah.
So for me, a set of pliers is really, really, really important, and a good set of pliers that has like the upper portion of it that you can cut a line with as
Hmm.
well, goes a long way. Goes a long way too. If I end up in a situation where I need to cut my line, you don't have like scissors out there, right?
Hmm.
And so being able to have a good set of pliers that you can use to cut a line, my goodness gracious, that should have been at the top of my list in terms of things that, and you can get a pair for what, like 450 for
Yeah.
$5 at Ace Hardware.
Hmm.
I mean, you don't have to spend a lot of money on them, but being able to have a good set of pliers, that's really important in terms of things that can go a really long way for you for bare essentials with equipment.
Yeah, no, totally agree with that. I love I have a Leatherman in each of my tackle boxes, so that's what my go-to, cuz then I got the pliers on there, you got the little knife on there if you need a cut bait or if you need to do something with your line or your lures. It really, that having that multi-tool, but or I mean more specifically a set of pliers is the pliers is critical. The multi-tool is kind of a nice to have, but definitely
Yeah,
something that I
yeah,
that I like having in there for sure. All right. Well, that pretty much concludes the fishing aspects of this gear. Now we're gonna move into hiking. Now, obviously, yeah, no, I know, Mike, you haven't done quite as much hiking as I've done, at least around the New England area. But I do know you've done a handful of hikes down in the Georgia area, so I'm sure you'll be able
yeah,
to weigh in on this a little bit. But I mean, hiking, not there's not as much gear that's really needed here, right? You're talking about appropriate clothing, which is kind of appropriate for whatever season you happen to be hunt or hiking in. Warm weather, you're gonna want to make sure you have clothing that's gonna wick away some of that heat, keep you cool so you're not getting too overheated. If it's cold weather, you want to make sure you have enough layers that you're not gonna freeze out there. But ultimately, some standard athletic clothing is gonna pretty much get you where you need to go as far as hiking is concerned. The one thing that is going to be semi critical is going to be some good footwear. Now, for
yeah.
me, usually I just have a kind of a cheap pair of hiking boots that I'll use, and they fit my feet well. They're lightweight. They don't really cause any problems in that regard, and I just plan on replacing them pretty frequently. I kind of use them as like a beater pair of hiking boots, and then I'll use them for a season or two, and then I'll just replace them after that, relatively quickly. That tends to be my strategy. Now other people will buy high quality boots, use them for year after year after year. This kind of depends on how you want to play it, but for me that option tends to work pretty well for me. um but if we're talking like minimum gear needed, I mean, even a good pair of sneakers will probably get you there, as long as you're okay with the fact that they could get muddy, they could get dirty, depending on the sneakers themselves, right? They could, if you want to make sure you have enough traction, you could be walking over an area that's going to be, slippery and whatnot. If you're walking it, if it's wet or you're doing any sort of like river crossings, having something that's waterproof is obviously an advantage there as well. And sneakers don't really have great ankle support. So
Yeah.
people go either way with this, right? Like I know I like having boots that have good ankle support. I think it's an advantage as I'm walking over rocks and stuff that I don't roll an ankle. But there are plenty of people who use kind of like more of a sneaker type hiking boot, right? It doesn't have that ankle support, but it still has that traction and waterproofing. Those can be really successful for that as well. Mike, what is as far as hiking clothing, footwear, what's your experience been? What do you think minimum requirements would be there?
Yeah, you're talking to somebody who was just talking about getting water and freezing toes and needing to go through three sets of socks at a football game. So clearly keeping having waterproof like shoes or boots goes a really long way. But you're also talking to somebody who, in my kayaking experience, a couple of episodes, I talked about rolling my ankle and having to put frozen peas during the Super Bowl because I was carrying a canoe out of the Chattahoochee River
Hmm.
and rolled my ankle and then dropped the canoe on my rolled ankle. So I mean, roll proof shoes with some support really does go a long way.
Hmm.
I will say that it's another one of those places where you got to throw fashion out the window, and I'm somebody that like has always prescribed to the like look good, feel good type of a thing. But when it comes to outdoor sports, you really got to throw that out the window because the your ankle doesn't when you're rolled and you're on the side of the path alongside the Chattahoochee River, wallowing in pain. It doesn't matter how fashionable your shoes and socks were, right?
Hmm.
And I would have wished that I had something with a little bit more support. Now, I wouldn't have anticipated. We weren't going on a hike that day. It's not
Hmm.
like I failed myself in terms of not preparing well or wearing the right footwear. I just
Right.
had like sneakers on, but they weren't roll proof and they didn't have great tread on them, and as a result, I ended up rolling my ankle. A couple of years ago, my in-laws bought for my wife and I a set of hiking boots, and it was anticipation of doing more hikes with them, and we did a couple of hikes over the course of the last like 5 years or so. We went up to a couple of places in kind of like the North Georgia area, but we every now and then will take a little hike out from the lake house. We'll drive up to, for instance, a couple of years ago, we went up to Table Rock State Park and did a couple miles of a hike with the whole family. And I know my father-in-law really enjoys that. And
Hmm.
for those, my in-laws got us for Christmas one year a set of hiking. A set of hiking. I want to call them boots, but they're a little bit lower cut than that. They're more like hiking shoes,
Hmm.
but they're really good. And they've got good tread on them, and they've got good support. And so being able to have those, if the next time I go hiking, I'm gonna have to find them because they're not always they're not on like the shoe rack that's out by the
Yeah.
front door by my work shoes. But that does go a long way. And then you're talking about kind of like breathable. A lot of the hikes that we're doing here are during the summer, and,
Hmm.
and we're down in Georgia. So being able to have something breathable, though. I did some hikes out when I was in New Mexico as well for a couple of my grad school summers, and so being able to have lightweight clothes that's wickable, as you're saying, goes a long way and is really important. But then the hike that I did in Ireland was freezing cold, and it was dreary, and it was wet, and it was windy, and so being able to have like a jacket
Hmm.
that was warm enough, but also kind of like cut the wind. I was wearing a newly purchased Irish knit sweater that actually did a really good job of being able to keep me dry and keep me warm in the
Hmm.
midst of that. I think I had like a windbreaker on top of it, but I was able to stay warm in an otherwise really chilly and dreary climate during a hike out in Ireland. So clothes are important when it comes to hiking for sure,
Yeah.
and those are a couple of places where I've seen that at work.
Yeah. No, definitely. Hey, those sheep, they know what they're doing when it comes to their fur, right? Keeping themselves nice and
especially in
warm.
Ireland, especially
Exactly.
in Ireland. Yeah, for sure.
So another thing that I would say is also critical in a hiking situation is going to be some sort of backpack. Now this is strictly for day hiking. Now we could probably do an entire episode on backpacking backpacks and what you would want to put in them. But for a day hike, right? We're talking about just starting out as a hiker, just minimum gear that you would need. Really, any sort of backpack is going to get you by. Um, I would say if you're looking at a backpack, try and get something that can carry some weight. Ideally, with some sort of waist strap and potentially like a chest strap too. That's just going to
Yeah.
allow that weight to be distributed over your back a little bit better so you're not carrying everything on your shoulders. Now, generally speaking, for a day hike, you're not going to have that much weight in there anyway. Most of the time, you're talking about carrying, your water, some snacks, maybe a lunch, extra layers, and that kind of and a similar emergency kit that I was speaking of earlier for like hunting type stuff. But that's really all that's going to be going in there, so it doesn't need to be this like giant backpack thing. So any backpack really would do. But I think buying something with a little bit of structure and some of those straps that can go around your waist or your chest um, is obviously very helpful. I also love a pack that has a water bladder as well. That would be like a camelback type bladder that you fill up with water, has that hose that's kind of running right out towards your mouth. And I find those are helpful because it allows that water access right there. You don't have to stop and grab a water bottle in order to take a sip. You can kind of be drinking the entire time while you're walking, and I find that aids at least for me, that aids in my hydration, making sure I'm drinking enough water, especially for longer day hikes when you're talking about hiking potentially you know 10 plus miles in a day. Making sure you're getting that water can be critical to your to making sure you're doing all right on the mountain.
Yeah, and kind of along those same lines, you're talking about these like packs and these straps. Some of my more recent hikes I've been doing with the very little ones in stow. My 4-year-old was like 1 or 2, and we had like a kid carrier, a little, and they've got lots of different versions of it.
Hmm.
Some of them they kind of like go on your back. One that we have, they kind of like strap to your chest. But the strap placement on those is critical, and being able to kind of like distribute that weight is really really important.
Hmm.
So having one of those, something to be able to have a kid carrier that's efficient and good for you, that goes a long way for
Hmm.
sure. And then you're talking about these water bladders in your packs, and I can't agree more. I'm somebody that really struggles with hydration, and so being able to have a camelback, even Pat, when we're going into like Disney World and we're
Hmm.
going to be down in the heat, being able to have that camelback keeps me hydrated, and it goes a really long way for me. It's something that I know
Hmm.
about myself, is that I struggle with hydration, and so I'm always trying to keep myself hydrated. And anytime that I'm going to be doing any sort of walking, whether it's around a theme park or whether it's on a hike, I always want to have that camelback with me. And to that end, having like electrolyte powder or electrolyte drinks,
Hmm.
those are really good for me too, to be able to keep up my hydration. Being able to kind of like stow away some layers is important too, especially on some of those hikes, that being able to have like a pack that you can have some lightweight layers
Hmm.
that you can toss on or toss off with ease and without it becoming too uncomfortable, can be really important. And then I'm going to be another advocate here. I'm going to plug my crunchy peanut butter and banana sandwich. If you guys are listening to this, you've heard me talk about this enough, that's my hiking snack as well. That won't surprise anybody. But being able to have like a snack for being able something that you can eat on the go, is important as well.
Nice. And then kind of I just touched on this when I was talking about what was going in the pack, but one thing I definitely advocate having in that pack is some sort of emergency supplies, right? So a compass to make sure that if you end up off the trail, you can find your way back to where you're going. Some amount of first aid, right? So if you do end up with some sort of wound out in the field, you can address that quickly. A fire starter, a light, and a knife, just really for any general situation where you could potentially need them. You find yourself in the dark, you find yourself cold. A knife is generally something good multi-tool to have out there anytime you're in the woods. So having, very similar to what I was indicating for hunting as well, just making sure you have those supplies in case an emergency situation arises, that you can you're protected to some degree, and you're a little bit safer when you're off in the woods.
Yeah, and so on the emergency line here, Pat, I've got a question. So when we're doing our hikes out in South Carolina, my mother-in-law always is fearful, and with good reason, of bear attacks when we're out there on the trail. And so she's gone so far as to get like bear whistles and bear bells and all of this stuff to kind of like deter bears, and like bear repellent. We've got all this stuff that we oftentimes will use, even if we're just going onto like what's it called, like the golf cart to bring trash up to like the trash dump. Sometimes my mother-in-law will insist on bringing the bells or something like that to try and stave off the bears. So do you find yourself, when it comes to preparing for emergencies and for hikes like this, do you find yourself preparing with the wildlife in mind, with bears in mind? And to what extent do you keep that wildlife attacks in mind when you're going on hikes for potential emergency situations?
Yeah, so I mean, you have to read the area you're in, right? So obviously, South Carolina is different than Georgia, which is different than Massachusetts, which is different than New Hampshire, right? So most of my experience hiking happens in New Hampshire, and New Hampshire, especially in the White Mountains, actually does have a pretty high black bear population. They The thing is that generally speaking, the bears are going to be more scared of you than you are of them. Most of the time, if when a bear encounters a person, they're gonna run off. Like I would say, the vast majority of the time. There's only the times where that's not going to happen is if you're like surprising a bear, or if it's like a sow with cubs, right? Those are kind of the
Right.
situations where you could be a little bit tricky. Now, having something like bear bells and stuff like that, that's just kind of notifying the bear that you're coming, right? It's reducing the risk of you surprising that bear. Now, in most instances, especially when you're like hiking and such like that, like if you're hiking in the middle of the day, most of the time these bears are going to be aren't going to be up and about for the most part during the day, right? They're going to be trying to avoid humans, especially if you're walking on a hiking trail. You know, there's other people there. You're talking, making general conversation. Generally speaking, the bears are going to try and avoid that situation because there's nothing good that can come of that for them, right? There have been times where bears have encountered humans. So bears are starting to get accustomed to people having food, right? So they see hikers, they see that they have packs, and they determine that, oh, I've had a hiker pack before and it had food in it, so now this hiker might have food in it as well. It's a very dangerous situation for the hiker, right? In
Right.
those situations, those are becoming more and more popular, but still, I would still say excessively rare, not something that is generally happening on the reg. Um, but yeah, it's something to be mindful of in the White Mountains. It's not necessarily something that is a day to day occurrence. Like I've hiked hours and hours in the White Mountains, and I've never seen a bear. Now that being said, if you're doing any sort of backpacking, right, you're carrying a lot more food with you, and you do want to be bear conscious, especially when you're talking about sleeping up there, right? So you don't want to sleep in a tent with all
Right.
your food. You want to store your food in a different location, generally at least 100 yards away, and in either a bear box, which is basically a locked up case type metal safe
Scent
type thing,
free,
which
right?
is going to keep the bear out of it, or up in a tree, right? That way it's going to make that's more or less it's going to make it more difficult for the bear to get up there, and ultimately the bear is going to say, I don't really want to deal with that right now. When you're talking about something like South Carolina, right? One, I'm not totally in the know as far as what the South Carolina bear situation is. But it sounds to me, if you're talking about bringing trash to like a dumpster or something like that, those dumpsters do tend to be a hotspot for bears because they know
Yeah.
that that's a place where they can find food. So in those situations, right, if there were a bear that was, digging through that dumpster or something like that, it could turn into a messy situation because the bear's there, the bear has food, and then you're walking up on this bear, and the bear's like, well, wait a minute, this is my food, not your food. Let's, I don't want you to take this food away from me. It could turn into a hairy situation. So there is some cause for caution there, right? Now,
Yeah.
the exact risk comes from what the bear population is, how many bears are in the area, what the likelihood of these how frequent have these bears been on that trash barrel, that sort of stuff, and that's going to kind of dictate how much of a risk it really is. In my area, right, Massachusetts, yes, we see bears from time to time, especially on the western portion of the state. The eastern portion of the state, much less frequent. and generally speaking, not a regular concern for us. But yeah, definitely
Right.
something to be mindful as you're walking through the woods. But as it stands right now, with the bear population and the interactions that we've seen, it's not something that you truly have to be like super concerned about the same way you would, like let's say grizzly country in the West.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I'll continue to be mindful of that when we're bringing out the trash. I think last year up at the lake house, we're always needing to be very mindful of disposing of once we do our fish fry, once we
Mm-hmm.
get all the fish that are at the house, what we do with those carcasses of the fish and with the fish guts and with the like the scales and everything, because that is super attractive to the bears. And so we always need to like be mindful of that, both of the scent of that, and we wash everything down with
Mm-hmm.
bleach in order to try and kind of mitigate that scent, but also being able to dispose of things in a way that's going to be able to keep the bears away is important, because
Mm-hmm.
I think last year we had a bag of trash that was leaning up against the garage door, and a bear came and was rifling through the trash
Mm-hmm.
like right on the driveway,
Mm-hmm.
right, like walked right by like 4 or 5 family cars,
Mm-hmm.
went right up to this trash bag and was rifling through it for some form of leftovers or dinner or something like that had been left in the bag. It wasn't the night of the fish fry, but it was that there was something in the bag that I wanted, and so it came all the way up to the garage door. I think the garage door was open, and so
Oh,
it came like into the garage and grabbed this bag and tore through it. So
wow.
it's definitely something to be mindful of. In South Carolina, the bear population is large enough to be a consideration in
Mm-hmm.
instances like that. Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. Well, Mike, I think we did a pretty good job here of covering what the necessities are if we're going off in a hunting or fishing or hiking adventure here. Anything else you want to add before we call it?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I'm really glad that I thought of those pliers. That would have been one that we would have ended the episode. And I would have been laying in bed and I would have been like, damn, I really should have mentioned that one. So I'm glad I thought of the pliers. That's a really good, it's a really good kind of like unsung hero here. But yeah, this has been a great episode. I always love these conversations, and being able to kind of keep it to the essentials for the gear was a lot of fun. So
No,
yeah.
definitely. I totally agree. It allows me to kind of think through things, what the essentials are. Allows me to think through my process on what I have and what I need. It's certainly something fun to think about. Um, but did we forget anything? If anybody out there in the internets, if you think of something that we forgot that is super critical, that is a necessity, let us know. Send us a comment. Send us an email. We're happy to hear it. Love to interact with you guys. Wanna interact more. So make sure you're doing that. Reach out on those social medias. Send us a direct message because we'd love to hear if there are any of those necessities out there that we've forgotten here. Um, but other than that, we had some great conversation here. I think we laid out a lot of the gear that we're using and a lot of the things that we consider essential. But I think that's going to be it for tonight. So until next time, get outside, have some fun out there. Thanks for listening to the East Coast Hunt, Fish, Hike podcast. If you have questions, comments, or have an idea for an episode, feel free to follow us and reach out over social media. Don't forget to rate, review, or tell your friends about the podcast. And until you hear from us again, get outside. Have some fun out there.